This is the breath spectrum, and basically the more times we breathe a day, that is ultimately keeping us in this stress zone. It's not even about the oxygen. We're good at getting air in. It's about getting the air out and slowing all of that down that we're not good at. Because when we don't get air out, we get what happens. We got stuck carbon dioxide, which fuels anxiety, fuels muscle tension, actually causes digestive problems. So the gas in our lungs, it's a really big deal that we're not filtering that out. And stimulated by rapid breaths is only just, as much as we're gasping for air, trying to get oxygen in, what we need to be a little bit more mindful of getting air out, slowing things down, you know? At the end of the day, this is all a response to what's happening around us, and we're trying to survive. But, you know, we push ourselves, because even though there's no danger around, the body is actually in this stress zone, you know, and we need to sometimes reel ourselves in.
Welcome to Q's Health and Wellness Podcast, your source for living a healthier lifestyle and developing a better mind, body, and soul. Through guidance, tips, and stories of highly successful fitness gurus, athletes, and individuals who are passionate about enhancing all aspects of life, we provide you with the tools to help you take your lifestyle to another level. And now your host, Quinn Mitchell.
Well, welcome to Q's Health and Wellness Podcast. This is your host, Quinn Mitchell. Today I have a very special guest. Misha Cavaye is the head strength coach for the South Bay Lakers and is also a massage therapist. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. I appreciate you coming on the show. For people that's not familiar with you, would you mind giving a brief introduction about yourself?
Yes, I appreciate it. So I am the strength coach, head strength coach and massage therapist for South Bay Lakers. And I also operate privately as a massage fascial specialist, posture specialist, biomechanics specialist, muscle and balance kind of specialist, kind of all that, keeping people on the table. And I really love to fuse both because at the end of the day, I think I'm a movement enthusiast. I don't really like to be boxed in as a strength coach per se. I just love movement and how we get good at it and how do we recover and how do we be pain-free and all of that. So basically, how do we treat our system and be the most optimal is what really drives me. I, as a former player myself, never dealt with injuries.
Where'd you play?
So I grew up internationally. I grew up in London.
Okay.
Basketball was my passion. I was like, I want to do this. Let me go to the US. So I came here for junior college. I only ever really played at Tacoma Community College in Washington State, but I redshirted at Santa Monica College here in LA. And I kind of did a little Santa Monica, played there, came back. Wasn't working out. At that point, I was like, well, where do I want to go? And that's why, I credit you for, nice that you played at the level you did. I said, I'm not going to play at a lower level. I'm going to go be an intern at a D1 and get involved with the coaching game, which is kind of like the route I did. I didn't enjoy it. Actually, I didn't really enjoy it at all. I didn't have fun. I was at Cal State Northridge, small-time D1. We made one tournament appearance even. That was cool. But my experience just wasn't what it lived up to be until I went to the strength and conditioning department, did an internship there. And that's where the passion kind of took off.
Got you. So would you say that's where you really got inspired to get into this?
Yeah, like I was always involved with basketball coaching to some degree. So I was also doing some skill development with youth. I was doing my, managing with the men's team. I got to do video editing too, which was kind of cool, getting this, to see that side of things. But I didn't like it as much until stepping in the weight room and the fact that I was learning the sciences too, because I was a kinesics major, just applying things. I was just like, this is kind of like where I want to be at. Even though I loved basketball, I was just like, well, I know the game. Maybe I could be a basketball specialist in the weight room. But the only reason I went to do the strength and conditioning internship because I thought I was going to be a coach. And I figured, well, if I want to be a good coach, I should know some of the physical side of things. And that's where it just kind of just took a turn, and I was just like, nah, this is where I want to be.
Nah, that's awesome, man. And for one question I wanted to ask you is, I know that you work with a lot of pros. So is there like a certain process that you have, like say when they first, say if they first draft a player, or if a player just starts working with you, is there something like an initial process that you go through?
Like a screening process?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, like especially what we do at the Lakers, there's been quite a few, because they've got pre-draft. I'll be there for that. I've been part of that, and I usually get to see some of our guys there because they come through. Then when training camp starts, the Lakers will do whatever they do, and it's kind of changed throughout the years because we've had a few changes in trainers. Mm-hmm. And then the guys that get cut from there come to our team, and then myself and our trainer have done our little screening as well. So there's been quite a few filtration of screenings, and you don't want to overly screen them. Mm-hmm. But the one that we kind of liked that we took was what we call the Y balance, which is basically just a single leg hip hinge in 3 directions. Very simple. And that was pretty much like the best we really needed. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's more in-depth things you could do. The Lakers do a lot more in-depth things, like putting scanners on the knees and, watching them land, and, checking for valgus and stuff like that. The G League, it's just a little more intense and fewer people. So you got to just kind of keep it quick and get moving. And what sucks is everything's short-term with G League. I see guys for 5-6 months and then they're out. Gotcha. Because very few people are local. If ever, there's nobody that's really local on our team. So that's one problem. It's kind of like everybody flies in, next day is like we're going, and then we're already in season within a week. There's not a long training camp. Training camp's very short in G League. So you're talking about we got a week from when the guys land to our first game. Wow. When they've already been cut. That's just the G League. So it's a different in the NBA. You've got a lot more people, a lot more time, and you can do a lot more assessing whatnot. However, what I would recommend to anybody, and this is what my mentor and I, it was funny, we really clicked on this the first time we kind of hang out, was that at the end of the day, every exercise is a test. Therefore, every exercise is your continual assessment. So I'm never not assessing these guys. I don't want it to sound like it's almost amateur, but when you put these guys through a workout, you'll really start to see where their weakness is. It's not about a certain protocol. It's more about how well are they completing your basic functional movements. And my workouts are not as basic as you think. I mean, I don't do a lot of bilateral patterns. I do a lot of unilateral, one leg versus the other, one arm versus the other. So you really get to know your athlete just by putting them through a workout. Wow. That's another food for thought, but it is realistically one of my most powerful ways that I see and learn what these guys can do. The third, and this is another thing that I had keep in my back pocket, I do a little muscle activation testing. This protocol called Neurokinetic Therapy, and it allows me to sort of figure out compensation patterns. If need be, I sometimes go to that, put them on the table for that. But not always. It's something I'm trying to implement a little bit more, but I use a lot in my private practice. Because at the end of the day, we do build up nasty trigger points, and those usually inhibit nice synchronous patterns of muscle firing because maybe it will overly fire. So this protocol allows me to kind of figure that out and kind of work on that out, work that knot, release it real quick, and then now there'll be a little bit more neutral. So I'm trying to find ways to put that in, but it's just tough because it's literally just me and an athletic trainer. Gotcha. So it's kind of catch-22. It's a little bit hard with the G League. You're really just kind of all hands on deck and you're just going. But in the ideal world, my man, this is what I would do.
Nah, that's awesome, man. So something I wanted to ask you is this something that you find with all of your athletes? Like, let's say if you have 5 athletes, right, or that you're training, is there like a particular thing that you find that's like an obstacle with all of them that they all have in common that you see?
Breath work, baby. Because they're all very stressed breathers. Athletes in general, first of all, their bodies are very tonically on, you got a lot of muscle tension. it's also fueled with a lot of stress breathing, you know? So untangling that sometimes is tough. And, you know, inhibition is a huge part of what I'm trying to do, because it's, you know, anybody can do a movement and fire all the muscles in their body. But that's, at the end of the day, we're going to run into a wall at some point, you know, our joints are going to get tired, or we're going to, you know, fall into our overly shifted pattern. So learning to do movements involving muscle inhibition in some way, or being more mindful of, for example, you know, mindful of less back extension as I do yay or nay or whatever it is, that's kind of one of the hardest things we're trying to do, just because they tend to everything's just firing, which is good, and especially, you know, if you want to promote, you know, athletic development and all that, that's great. Here's the thing: injury prevention has got to be key, and lower back issues, especially with my guys, that's a big one, especially mid-season. God, everyone's back's so tight, and as a massage therapist, you're releasing them day in, day out, and my back's still tight. So that's what led me to think that, you know, we really got to untangle some of this.
So for the people that's listening, would you mind just getting a little bit deeper into what stress breathing really is?
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about the spectrum of breathing. On one end, someone that's super stressed out, they're hyperventilating, right? They're taking rapid breaths. And remember, I said, on average, we breathe about 22,000 times a day, give or take. The more stressed you are, you're going to breathe more rapidly. Someone who's hyperventilating, super stressed out, anxiety attack, panic attack, all that, it's going to be breathing at a very rapid rate. Okay? Go look on the other end of the spectrum. Let's talk about the monk that's meditating in the mountains somewhere for hours and hours on end, maybe a day on end. He's just meditating, sitting there. Their breath rate is probably at an all-time low, very slow, very elongated, so that they're not using our metabolism at all, sparing energy. This is the breath spectrum, and basically the more times we breathe a day, that is ultimately keeping us in this stress zone. It's not even about the oxygen. We're good at getting air in. It's about getting the air out and slowing all of that down that we're not good at. Because when we don't get air out, we get what happens. We got stuck carbon dioxide, which fuels anxiety, fuels muscle tension, actually causes digestive problems. So the gas in our lungs, it's a really big deal that we're not filtering that out. And stimulated by rapid breaths is only just, as much as we're gasping for air, trying to get oxygen in, what we need to be a little bit more mindful of getting air out, slowing things down, you know? At the end of the day, this is all a response to what's happening around us, and we're trying to survive. But, you know, we push ourselves, because even though there's no danger around, the body is actually in this stress zone, you know? And we need to sometimes reel ourselves in. Yeah, well, first of all, it's about a breath cycle, and what I tell people is you got to get everything out. So blow at least 5 seconds, wait a little bit, get yourself a nice little pause, because we tend to want to gas air right in. Let's just wait, and then breathe in. And what that will do is, not only will filter out the excess carbon dioxide and whatnot in your lungs, but B, will set you up for a really nice expansion. And so that's why I say you can't get air in until you get it out. So that's number one. You got to get that cycle in. Number two is, so there's a particular position which I like. It's on my YouTube page. It's a staple of Postural Restoration Institute, which is another pretty much where I get all my breath work from. So I like to promote them a little bit, because if anybody wants continuing education, look that up, Postural Restoration Institute. But they have an exercise, it's called the Hemispheric Bridge. You're basically on your back and you got your feet on the wall in a 90-degree position. So that way your back is relaxed, you can do your breathing, but we want feet grounded, and we want a little bit of hamstring activity because hamstrings help ground our pelvis. So we're trying to do a little bit of pelvic control. So it's kind of like a way of, let's simplify everything, take away as much unnecessary stress, but give yourself a little bit of control of the pelvis and give yourself the abs, which you will get when you exhale properly. Because that's the other thing is we can get abs in many ways, but we won't truly get our best abs until you blow out all the way and feel that tight vacuum that you get. That's the abs that you want to have control and own throughout your life.
Got you. And I know we were talking like this before the podcast started. And I know you were getting more into depth about it because this is something that not a lot of people really realize or know about. And I know that you mentioned to me as well, it's something that you have to struggle with the players that you have, even just trying to get them to buy the process, because even with their brand new and all the information that you're mixing in right now, but with a player that's really not familiar with this, it may just go in one ear and out the other. So one thing I want to ask you is what benefit do players get from actually knowing how to breathe better, and just overall, like how does that enhance their performance in the long run?
Sure. Well, like I said, when you're just gasping for air in, you're not filtering it out properly. You're going to have residual carbon dioxide. It's going to feel muscle tension. It's going to feel cloudy anxiety thoughts. That's stuff you don't want to be dealing with. You want to be at a relaxed zone. Your muscles are going to know exactly what to do in the heat of competition. So we don't necessarily want to be ramping ourselves over and over, especially if you practice and done your work, you're going to know what to do. Then the name of the game is, once you've done your work, is to stay calm and grill yourself in. And, always just read and react, basically. So I've actually recently put up a post. The Posture Restoration Institute reposted this about an article of how Steph Curry, during timeouts, they recorded it. He could lower his heart rate to, I don't know, whatever it is, but a very low level. In just the whatever 1 minute to 3 minute timeout, whatever the NBA, 1 minute's a college, NBA is like 3 minutes, but whatever. Anyway, it was just this really impressive feat, and it's all because of his breath work. Oh, wow. And at the end of the day, like I said, it doesn't matter. Million ways you could skin a cat, million ways you could do breath work, but so long as you're doing some of the right principles, you're going to be able to lower your heart rate, bring yourself out of the stress zone out of that, what we call the sympathetic state, that's your stress zone, your on zone, into your parasympathetic state, which is more of your calm zone, decreasing muscle tension, decreasing anxiety thoughts, and just allowing yourself to be a little bit more grounded. So, and again, not restricting movement capabilities, because once again, stress breathing affects posture. Once your posture's misaligned, that will affect, whether you're not a basketball player, as you're a weightlifter or whatever, that's going to affect your squat depth. That's going to affect different things, or range of motion in your arm. If you're a pitcher, for baseball. So symmetry is never going to be it's a continual thing. It's never thing like, oh, you're going to be balanced forever. Like I said, it's forever in life. Stress is always going to be there. How you deal with it is the key, and being able to deal with it is the key.
And one thing I literally just realized, like when you're stretching one of your players' hamstrings out, and let's say you're stretching and you have the leg up, and you tell them to breathe in, right? And then you take 1, 2, 3, and they breathe out, and they can literally go up. It's literally like stuff like that is literally, I can correlate to what you're saying, because it's like I really didn't think about it in the moment until like when you're telling me about it right now, like how important actually breathing really is to an athlete. And I think a lot of athletes really overlook that.
Yeah. And then the funny thing, you mentioned hamstring. I love telling this story. This was my first little, because breathing, when you manipulate breathing with somebody, you can literally change their range of motion within 5 to 10 breaths. And that's when they're really like, whoa, what'd you do? And the first time I had a moment like that, which I actually recorded with a client, it's on my YouTube page and I posted on Instagram. I was going to do a repost actually. soon. Basically, the client has neck issues, so he's got nothing wrong with his hamstrings, but I'm telling him to do that very breathing exercise I just told you to do. So it involves a little bit of a hamstring activity. So he comes in one day and says, yeah, I feel really tight in my hamstrings, but I know like he hasn't done anything for his lower body. I know there's no reason he could be tight. I'm like, this guy just hasn't been breathing properly. And I asked him, you've been like doing a lot of computer gaming? And like, yeah, sure. Like, so we've probably been staring at screens and all kinds of like bad stuff, stressful stuff at the end of the day. So I did a little range of motion test. I even asked him to look at his phone because he does that a lot. So he's getting all this glaring input as well, stressing his system even more. I check his passive range of motion. It's terrible, you know, sub 45 degrees, like 30 degrees. All right. Okay, cool. I put his phone away. I cover his eyes and we do 5 deep breaths. Check his range of motion, immediately improved. It's almost at 45 degrees. All right, let's do 5 more deep breaths. 5 more. Check his range of motion. It's now at 90 degrees passive, which is what is optimal for hamstrings in people. If you can get passive 90 degrees, you don't really want to be stretching that sucker unless there's a valid reason to, because hamstrings, like I said, ground our pelvis. They're very powerful. We really need more hamstring work, and they're actually tied in with breathing patterns as well.
Wow, that's awesome, man. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know with myself, that was something I struggled my college career was my hamstrings. Like I pulled them. I think I tore one year. So that was always my weakness. And I always started just stretching it and trying to just foam roll it out. But little did you know, just talking about just the simple things of breathing will really help it in the long run. I never knew that.
Yeah. And like I said, even a little bit of pulling them back in, because here's the thing, basketball, the way we're in this very much upright position but somewhat hips bent and our hips are tilted forward, what that does is put the hamstrings in a very stressed state. So that's why every basketball player's hamstrings always feel super tight, because they're just very stressed in a lengthened state. But that's why you don't necessarily want to stretch them, because they actually need a little bit more pulling in. They want a little bit more grounding, and like I said, if not, you're only going to tilt that pelvis further forward, which the anterior tilt, as we all know, is the enemy these days. The postural enemy people face. But let me tell you, anterior pelvic tilt has almost nothing to do with hip flexors, which is almost one of the worst things we could be targeting. It's releasing that hip flexor, thinking it's going to fix our pelvic tilt. Your hip flexors might feel tight, but it is a result of the pelvic tilt. As a result of many things, breathing patterns, hamstrings, all this stuff. Like I said, everything's connected.
Anything's connected, my man. So one of the things I wanted to ask you on this subject is injury prevention. I know you touched on that a little bit, but how important really is taking time out and just to do like certain little exercises, even after training, let's say, just to help prevent further injuries? Because when I was playing, I really wasn't injury prevention. It was like a major focus like 1 year, but after that, not a lot of programs really focused on that. Like we would do things like roll our foot on like a tennis ball or something simple like that, just to like try to relieve like the arches of our feet. But I know you working with pros. I know there's a lot more advanced stuff that you guys do. So could you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, yeah, in terms of muscle releasing is huge, especially as an athlete going day in, day out. You know, you're going to be banged up, you're going to get knots, and you want to work those out. Because like I said, those knots are not going to, they're going to actually inhibit stuff down the line. So we want to kind of take care of those. We have on my staff, myself, an athletic trainer, and an assistant athletic trainer. So between the three of us, we offer our treatments, you know, usually pre and post practice, and then on the road there'll be always lots of treatment offered there. So we kind of cover the guys in that sense. But trainers usually tend to stick a little bit more with specifics, and I will tend to do a little bit more general work so that the guys can get, you know, somewhat of a, you know, more of a general full body stuff. There's cold tubs that we do. I didn't know how I felt about that, but these days I'm a little bit more in favor. But They do that,
So what are your thoughts on them? Because I know, like out all the major schools, you got the cold tubs, the hot tubs, like the foam rolling. So what are your thoughts? Like, what really works the best versus something that really is least effective? Let's say.
Well, I think the cold water is good. At the end of the day, you're trying to manipulate blood flow, and I think the cold water does a great job.
Mm-hmm.
On the Lakers side, they even have a cryo chamber, and I know it's not even the most popular thing because a lot of players, they just don't like getting in there. They prefer getting in the cold tub that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think water is pretty good. Ice water is pretty good. I prefer it from wrapping ice myself. I think wrapping ice is just a little bit too localized, and at the end of the day, we also got to remember that swelling, lymphatic drainage, which is huge, doesn't need compression. It needs flow. It needs the ability to move. So therefore, for lymphatic drainage, which I'm also big on lymphatic drainage, which is basically swelling management. We want to manipulate hot with cold. So that's why I kind of now got back into the cold water thing. And I'm also now getting into the whole ice water therapy in terms of going neck deep and practicing deep breathing. And that's the other kind of breath work that's also really popular out now. Athletes get in ice water all the time, but they're usually kind of quenching and holding their breath and not relaxing or getting into a deep cycle. So that's kind of there are two things we're doing here. I would hope to coach my guys on how to do proper breath work in the water. But as a recovery tool, swelling management, I think the ice water is one of the better things. However, even getting onto this track, I'm now very big on ending showers with a cold rush. Because you're going to breathe. It forces you to breathe properly because to withstand it, you're going to kind of get into your deep breaths. And B, that nice shock that you get that's the kind of flushing that we really want. Healthy, natural flushing.
Gotcha. And I know this is something that you've broken the body down to really, really looked into jumping mechanics with players. So I know that a lot of players, even myself, let's say, even because I was a 2-foot jumper. So there are different landings and things like that. I know that a lot of you guys go into studies and get in detail about that. So would you just mind just going into jumping mechanics and how important they are, especially when landing, taking off, and just different things like that?
Ooh, this is a deep one. Okay, my personal opinion is, first of all, this is the philosophy I live by, and again, it came from my mentor, a great guy, Dr. Craig Liebenson, another great guy to look up, chiropractor, but movement-based, great strength and conditioning work. So I get a lot of stuff from him, and his quote is, "It's not the load that breaks you down; it's the load you're not prepared for." Bottom line, at the end of the day, if you're prepared for the load that you're going to face, and if your legs are strong, that's number one. Because here's the thing, we're talking jump mechanics. Well, what kind of mechanics? Because we're reacting to defense. That's the amazing thing about basketball, is that they pull these crazy dunks out of nowhere. They're not high jumpers, they're not long jumpers, and they're not even if you check on the mat, the mat that everybody uses, that you do the 4 jumps or whatever, even to get the max out of that does not simulate what you're going to be doing in a game. So in the game, bad things are going to happen. And Michael Jordan had some really weird angles in his knee, very deep shin angles, and actually there's a basketball blogger, and he's a jump expert, Paul Fabritz, PJF Performance. He talks about this all the time, like how Michael Jordan would get very deep into his knee angle. Not something you'd think an athletic trainer would like, maybe, or, some coaches might not even advise, but this guy was so athletic and gangly, he could get away with it. Strong enough, he could get away with it. So I think at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is your mechanics are going to be your mechanics, and how you're going to get up is how you're going to get up. But let's make sure you can handle the load. And when I say handle the load, I mean your left leg has got to be as good as your right leg, especially with eccentric load, but lunge work, hip work, whatnot. That's got to be all on point. Because that's the other thing is basketball is an asymmetrical sport. You're going to be pushing off triple threat off of one leg predominantly. If you're a single leg jumper, you're going to jump off one leg predominantly. And even if you're a 2-footed jumper, you're loading on one leg and exploding off the other leg, not reciprocating. So at the end of the day, we've got these imbalances. And remember, the human body is naturally imbalanced. It's kind of just the way it is. What are we doing in the weight room to correct that? And actually, you touched on that. It's like, do you have any, movements that we can do after in terms of recovery? Maybe not directly after the game, but next day, yes, I would go into reciprocating, alternating, unilateral certain strength work, maybe just to kind of readjust the hip a little bit. Get that right glute firing and pushing into left stance, and get that left glute firing into right stance, and get that left adductor pulling the left hips, and get that right adductor pulling the right hips over. Little twisty twist, side to side. There's 3 planes of motion right there, which again, we're just going to be lacking when we're in the heat of competition. We're going to go to our dominancy. And so that's what I just don't want to tread on your answer and be like, it doesn't matter. It's just at the end of the day in basketball, whatever happens, happens. And you might see somebody with some terrible mechanics, but what they need to do is be able to handle the load. That is number one. And the other thing I kind of touched on is load to explode. So that is basically what is happening better on one side and versus the other. You're loaded on one side, you're exploded on the other. And that kind of goes into our whole biomechanical pattern. It all goes into our asymmetrical pattern. At the end of the day, you want to reciprocate and alternate healthily. So finding ways to implement that later on is very important in fixing the patterns. You're never going to jump off of your weak side as well as your good side, and I wouldn't expect people to. But can you load as well on your weak side as well as your good side, which is a mobility thing. It's also a biomechanical thing. It's a shifting thing. It's a breathing thing. It's all everything together. It's a 3-dimensional, how well are you handling 3-dimensional biomechanics to your expert, to your body's expertise.
No, that's awesome, because I know for me, being a fan of basketball my whole life, and when you look at somebody, just let's say LeBron James, for instance, he's 252, but he's flying, and you rarely see him getting hurt. So I know you can see it up close and personal. So is this something like, I know we've heard articles about how serious he takes his recovery, but as you see it firsthand, is this something that really goes on? Like, is he very strict on when his recovery is, and he spends that amount of money on his recovery?
Yeah, I'm very blessed and fortunate to witness 2 of the greatest ever, how they took care of themselves. Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, and LeBron. Very, very fortunate to have these experiences, which is kind of what got me so into recovery, because I even had the pleasure of asking Kobe once, hey, what kind of recovery modalities do you use? What kind of therapist? And he listed off 8 different people. And I'm like, oh, shit, man, this guy really, because I was trying to figure out what's the best massage technique to learn. Do I want to learn fascia? Do you want to learn trigger point stuff? And because he labeled off everything, I was like, I got to learn it all. But, it's being methodical, being strict, following your timeline. Kobe wasn't so much in the weight room. I'm sure he lifted, of course, but LeBron is getting his lift in every day. He gets his massage work as well as any special needs for injury, any special releases. So I know he has different few therapists in that sense. So it's just dedication, Yeah, it's not even rocket science. It's just dedication. And one of the things that I see, it's a shame, is because, the 3 greatest ever now, Michael, Kobe, LeBron, are all such good at taking care of themselves. what I tend to see is basketball players aren't so fond of doing that. They don't like doing their mobility. They don't like lifting. Mobility, I get. No one's really good at mobility because it's all about breathing anyway. But the lifting part really kind of is like, sometimes I'm like, come on, guys. Why, I make it as simple as it can be, but you got to kind of love this because it's the only way you're going to be injured free, or your best chances of being injured free. Again, it's not the load that breaks you down. It's the load you're not prepared for. This is the fastest way we're going to train the nervous system. It's the winner. So it's more of a shame. That's something we need to get the youth on, because it's like, learn to love lifting. I'm sorry if there's a coach that made it bad for you. That sucks. But in general, lifting is great.
So that's the next question I want to ask you, because I know when I was playing in high school, there was always a myth saying don't never lift during the season. It's bad for you. It's going to throw off your shot. What's your honest opinion on that?
I don't think so at all. Because Michael Jordan, he was the epitome of that, lifted on game days. And I think that works for him. I think that activated muscles. I think that stimulated the testosterone, got his going. The touch, man, you can get that at like nothing. Like, even right now, I work out with my former college teammates and roommates. We don't live together now, but we used to work out all the time. So we still meet up once a week, and we do our strength work in the park, and then we go to the court and shoot. And it's all psychological, man. It's just psychological. Within 3 to 5 minutes, you're back. If you're feeling that drained, you're not lifting enough because you don't have those strengths, and you need to build that up. So there is that little curve, we got to get over that hump. Of course, your legs have got to get a little bit of soreness at first, but don't save that for the season, for God's sakes. Do that in the off season. And then if you stay on top of it, if you keep doing it like the greats do, you're never off track.
And I want to backtrack real quick. I just want to talk about your journey with the Lakers. Like, how did that come about with you running into that organization?
Okay, so kind of back on my story. So I graduate college. I'm like, I want to do this. I do personal training for 6 months. I got fired because I sucked at sales. I'm like, all right, damn. But I still love that. I still kind of love what I'm doing, all that stuff. Out of the blue, because I'm well connected in the basketball world, my boy hits me up, says, well, the LA Defenders need a ball boy. Would you like to be on board? This is South Bay Lakers, were known as the LA Defenders board. And this was during the lockout season. So almost eight or so years ago, 9 years ago, right? We're 2 games in. I'm doing my ball boy duties, and they put me on rebounding, which I love. I'm kind of tall, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna bust my ass because I'm trying to impress people. And it was because I was busting my ass rebounding that the head equipment manager for the Lakers was like, yeah, I want him for our ball boy stuff. Because they really sucked at the time. They were known as a very sloppy crew. And so it was my rebounding that got me to be a ball boy for the Lakers. So I immediately almost got promoted to what seemed like a very rare position, because ball boys don't quit. Especially not with the Lakers very often. So that was I did that 5 years, did ball boy and assistant equipment manager duties for 5 years, up until Kobe Bryant retired. So I got to be exposed, in the last 5 years of his career. A blessing, absolute blessing. He wasn't always around, but I got a few golden nuggets from being around with him. And then when he retired, there was a lot of shift in the organization. And at the time, the LA Defenders, South Bay Lakers, only had an athletic trainer. When they moved her up to the Lakers, they said, okay, we're now going to have an athletic trainer and a strength coach. And because I was already doing ball boy duties for the Lakers, they were like, well, you can be the equipment manager and a strength coach, because it was you have to do kind of multiple positions in the G League. So it was kind of worked out. Right place, right time, right opportunity. I was the first one there. There was never this position before, because like I said, it was a bit bad before. Like, an athletic trainer would have to do equipment, athletic training, and when they could get in the weight room. And that was very phased out. They wanted to make the development league, or now G League, into a legitimate, well taken care of league where the players are getting service, and it's not just this trashy, you're not getting, all you get is tape. They want real service. And that's why I offered to do the massage therapy as well. Well, I was like, well, I got that under my belt. Let me offer that. So I do a bit of, 3 things, and it keeps me very busy. But I love it, man. Very blessed and very lucky that I do have these powers, and I get to interact a lot with the players and see their growth in the weight room. And yeah, man.
That's awesome. So I know that you work with Kobe. He was one of my favorite players growing up. So if you don't mind, would you mind just sharing with the listeners, like maybe an untold Kobe story that nobody ever heard before, or just something that you watched or experienced while you were there?
It's hard to say. Like I said, because he wasn't around all the time. Mm-hmm. But first of all, that competitive spirit never died. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you that, and so, it's like, first of all, you have to kind of almost match that, not match it, but you can't be afraid. Mm-hmm. And then most people are going to be like, scared of him, but it's like, and obviously the first time I ever had to do anything for him, which was actually take him to the airport because he was going to go take his godforsaken helicopter home. I did that a few times, and I remember the first time driving the van, I didn't even turn the lights on because I didn't even know. I was just so nervous, and you're just kind of terrified. And I remember he's getting out. Yeah, your lights are on. I mean, your lights are off. And I was just like, oh shit, I didn't realize. But then this is the one that gets everyone laughing. The one time I picked him up from the airport to practice. This is a 5-minute drive, because we're right by the airport. We're stuck at our red light turning left. We sit there about 30 seconds. He's like, I ain't got time for this. Run this bitch. And I'm like, all right. You don't really question it because, it's intimidating. He's intimidating. Like, he just sits there on his phone. He's very quiet. But then there was a couple of times when I was just like, no, I'm gonna go ask a question today. And that's when I asked him. So I was like, what kind of manual therapy do you like to recover with? And that's when he went off. He was just told me, yeah, well, I have this kind of guy. And that was like probably my greatest moment because that's what I'm into. And so hearing somebody that I looked up to since I was 14 years old tell me like what are the things that work for him, that kind of planted the seed, like, yeah, I'm going to go learn all of this shit because, excuse my language. So because it was just, that was a really inspiring moment. Then the other thing, like not like that, nothing that was funny or anything. That was the funniest thing with the red light thing, to be all honest. But not a special moment. In his last year, he got partnered with a very specific therapist from this research company, doctor he was involved with, biomechanics stuff, involved with manual therapy. And so they would go into the King's locker room. And so mind you, I was always stationed in the visitors' locker room. That was my kind of responsibility, which is great because you always got to meet other teams, but you were never really around the Lakers much. So that's why I also don't have as many Kobe stories because I was never in the Laker locker room. I was always in the visitors' locker room. However, he's going into the King's locker room, and that happens to be right next to the visitors' locker room. So even time and time again, I had the access, and I had to let his therapist in because he just couldn't get in because he didn't have the keys and stuff. So developing that relationship with the therapist, one day, his therapist is even just before Kobe arrives, just like, here, get on the table. Let me show you something. This is what we like to do with him. We checked his pelvic bone right here, and blah, some basic stuff. And just getting that, showing me, it was just like, it was like in my head, I'm like, hell yeah, you can do this. You should be this guy one day. You can learn all this stuff, and you care, because I do care about the body and I want to learn all these things. So that was just really huge for me. And then, just, hey man, that last corner 3 he took, I'm right there on the baseline, baby, with a huge grin on my face because I knew it was going in. And then ESPN did this moment of like 5 things or 10 things that happened on Kobe's last 3. and they pointed me out and put this caption saying "no doubt," because I had this big grin on my face because he's like, "No doubt that's going in."
Yeah, man.
And yeah, man, that's all I got for you was Kobe's stories. Like I said, he wasn't always around, but the things I got, man, they were.
That was awesome, man. And one thing I just want to ask you as well was the work ethic. Was that always there? Because a lot of people, they hear about it on YouTube, they hear about it through other stories. But was that work ethic of him showing up before everybody, being the last one in the gym, was that always there?
I'll be honest with you, it wasn't, but I know, we all know Kobe. Mm-hmm. We all know in his own time, he was doing everything on his own time. Mm-hmm. Like he was probably waking up 4 or 5 and getting his first workout in. I think he did that habitually. Because that's another thing is how many, with a lot of these the youth today is like, how many workouts a day are you doing? Mm-hmm. And again, these got to be like, you can't just kind of compile them. These got to be quality workouts, strategic, like I said, with what the great ones do. And so getting your first one in early in the morning is very critical because I believe Kobe quoted this. He's like, then I can go home, I take my nap. Then I wake up and then I do my practice. Just workout number 2, you do your practice. And then so you're already by midday, you're already on number 2 down and you have a whole day still with time to rest. So once he got injured, he definitely kind of was out the picture a little bit. But we all know, he was probably working, and at the end of the day, it became a thing where he literally couldn't because of his shoulder, right? He couldn't shoot a jump shot. So it was, for him, it was a sparing thing by the end. But just knowing his habits and knowing the stories, it is, not necessarily. Yeah, I'm sure most of his career he showed up before everybody. While the time I was there, not necessarily. That was more like the rookie's job. The people who are trying to get the ball, they got to be their first ones. But it's more about these day in, day out habits that we know Kobe was good at. And I know one of the things was getting that AM workout, the Breakfast Club workout per se.
No, definitely. And I'm glad that you touched on that topic of getting quality workouts in, because a lot of people, they go to the gym and they just do anything. But with a lot of the professionals that even you work with, they all have, or you tell me if I'm wrong, they all have strategic workouts that they have to do throughout the day, because they're not just going in there blindfolded, let's say.
Yeah, man. Here's the thing, because at the end of the day, reps are quantity is overrated. Reps are overrated. It's all about the quality. Why? Because it's all about the muscle memory. At the end of the day, competition is reaction. And at the end of the day, there are guys that live in the gym, and then when it comes to the heat of the moment, they just can't get themselves together. That's just that. There are people like that. How are you able to, maximize and stay grounded even in competition? That has to be very, like I said, very strategic. You have to also get your rest in, because you can't just go. That makes no sense. You're gonna run into a wall one way or another. So, it's all about, planning it. Like I said. Man. I think.
Man, I'm glad that you said that, because I know, like I said, even when I was in college, I was one of those people that would just work, but I hadn't put no time into recovery. So later in my career, that caught up to me. And like I said, when I mentioned before on the podcast, before we started, it was like that groin injury that creeped up on me without me knowing, that's something I could have prevented if I put the time in to recover.
Yeah, and which is quality. At the end of the time, you'd be spending time in quality zones, not quantity. You'd be because you're in the pain threshold, you'd have to back off on as much quantity. But if you hammer down, and I'm going to get 3 quality sessions in per day, your body, your whole systems gain so much more. And that's why the quality always wins over quantity. Which kind of also is the strength versus endurance. You want strength. You want solid, sound strength. How long that's endured for is always going to be a case-by-case scenario, and that can be applied to whatever it is: basketball, triathlon, martial arts, whatever it is, desk jockey. At the end of the day, we need the quality first, And then where we want to take that, depends on you. But we don't spend enough time with quality rest.
Definitely. And when it comes to nutrition now, I know with you being in the league, I know that's something that I don't know if it's as serious as people may think. And I know with the Lakers, I know it may be diets. I don't know. But how important is nutrition when it comes to that?
Yeah, I got one more Kobe story. Yeah, because of nutrition. So I got my first taste of nutrition when I was shadowing the strength coach at the Lakers before the previous strength coach of the Lakers, Tim DeFrancesco. Shout out to him, great guy, awesome, really, really ahead of his time in terms of implementing stuff. One of the best strength coaches I've seen. So it was great watching him for the 5 years. But one of his big things in year number 2, he really wanted to push nutrition. He really wanted to push that for recovery purposes, basically an anti-inflammatory diet, which I still really ride with. I think it's a great thing. I'll talk about it in a second. But he brought in this doctor, naturopathic doctor, who promotes this diet to kind of really get the players to buy in, and the GM and everybody was bought in. All right, we're going to fund this and whatnot. And I remember they had a meeting. They were losing, by the way. This is when they had Dwight Howard the first time around, and all of these players and Steve Nash, and it's like, why aren't we winning? So they were like losing, and they had like a meeting, and at one point, not a meeting, like a talk about the nutrition. And then Kobe was just like, I don't give a F about this. I give a F about winning championships, and walked out the room. So, I mean, that was really hard. It was the wrong message to send, bless his soul. But, that's just the Kobe story. But in the end, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because young players, they eat like crap, they eat what they want. There's many distractions. There's all these sugary items around, and people have cravings and whatnot. And the problem is that a lot of people care when it's too little. Ooh. There you go. A lot of people care when it's too little, too late in terms of with nutrition. I think it is important. And then you think, you have to care. The earlier you care, the better. It's just people don't. Cravings and taste buds really affect what we eat. And I learned to crave vegetables. I learned to crave less carbs. I learned to embrace a lot of the healthy things. That's just me. But the ultimately the whole nutrition thing backfired with Coach Tim, and it had nothing to do with what Kobe did or walking out. That was just a funny story. Everyone could laugh at that. At the end of the day, it was just these young guys didn't want to eat that way. Whereas Kobe did. He was all about it. He was, he was all like, yeah, let me eat this way. I'll I'm on board. Steve Nash, I'm on board. The vet guys, for sure. But sometimes it's too little too late with those bodies that are so broken down and have so many bad reps. Back in the day when Kobe was sponsored by Sprite, he would actually drink Sprite until the trainers told him, you got to stop doing that. He would drink Sprite under timeouts.
Wow.
He was even, and even like, showing in his younger years, showing up to the locker room with McDonald's. And so that's my other point, is that these freaks of nature, they get it done. They get it done. It does matter, but at the end of the day, sometimes it doesn't, and I'm not going to tell you have to eat right when Lou Williams is busting your ass. And I know Lou Williams doesn't care, because he would prefer to go get Popeyes over the meals that were prepared by the team when he was with us. So, players, they have their cravings, and sometimes you don't want to take that away. Like, if you irritate a guy, be like, no, you're not having what you like having before a game. You're going to eat what I tell you to eat. That might not sit too well with him. And, you don't necessarily want to mess with the guy's psyche. So, at the end of the day, we all have our little cravings, but moderation is best. The more you can adopt that, the earlier, the better. The concept of moderation is a wonderful principle in general, and with nutrition is what I live by, is moderation. So the sooner we can just start thinking, what does that mean to me when I eat? How can I adopt it? How can I live by that? I think that would be the better. But it's everybody's journey, man. The sooner you do it, it'll serve you well in terms of recovery.
Now,
But the problem is, guys don't care soon enough.
now does the water component, does that coincide with that nutrition, or drinking water? Is that like a big necessity that you guys preach over there, or?
Water is number one. Is I have the pleasure of in games. Oh, my bad. That I'm serving the water to the players. I'm kind of still doing ball boy stuff, so I get to kind of monitor what my guys are drinking and during games. But of course, that's just in games. I don't know what they're doing outside of it, and I know it's very hard. It's very hard to keep on tab with your drink, with your fluid amounts. That's one of the reasons I have a liter bottle, because I know that if I drink 3 of these a day, I'm good. That's probably one of my best advice for anybody, because unless you do have a bottle, it's really hard to keep yourself on track. So how do I keep 10, 12 guys on track? It's a shame. Water is, and that's huge, man. Water is a big thing.
And the last question I want to ask you, I appreciate you just coming on the show, giving all this great advice. Is let's talk about the mental health aspect, because I know this is something not a lot of people even address nowadays. Like, it's starting to become more popular nowadays, but I know you working with the pros. This is something I know that they may struggle with on a day-to-day basis. So when it comes to mental health, how important is it? And how important is it to athletes, for even pro athletes, to address it and even deal with it at that point?
It's huge. It's huge, because at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not to put mental health down in any way, because I even struggle myself, because at the end of the day, what is the ultimate? It is the control of our thoughts. And that is the elite of the elite, people like Kobe Bryant, who are not fazed by anything, literally not fazed by anything. How do you achieve that? I don't know. It's a product of your environment, being a bright individual, whatnot, but a lot of mindfulness too, a lot of breath work, mindfulness. So this is where the breath work kind of comes back into play, because breathing is mindfulness of yourself, so this is, kind of, again, what is the spectrum? But, when we are out of ourselves, when we're not reeled in, when we're too distracted, we start focusing on the things we can't control, and we start reading the things we shouldn't be reading. And social media is obviously one of the worst things out there in terms of if you're struggling, fueling the fire. Obviously there are bloggers out there who promote, good health and stuff, and mental health and whatnot, but there's a lot of noise out there, basically. And that's our problem, is that we can't ignore the noise. So, it's a huge component. And again, that's, like I said, stress never goes away. So mental health is a continual practice. It's just, for some of us, we, fall into these little whirlwinds and bad cycles more so than others. Maybe some people can just handle it, but then again, bottling up is also equally traumatic. So this is the continuum of life, my brother. It's like, you got to think about that. If you look at the universe, it's chaos. Like, there's nowhere inhabitable. No, I mean, well, somewhere deep to the depths maybe, but what we know is just, it's a lot of chaos. Even our solar system's chaos. Somehow this Earth was created, but even the world is chaos. It's like storms and crazy weather everywhere. Like, you could only live in a certain amount of places in the world. The world represents orderly chaos, and our bodies are also products of orderly chaos, because there's tons of crazy stuff going on around our bodies, atoms flying, all these systems integrating. It is all a balance of orderly chaos. Because there was no real balance to begin with. It's our job to find that flow of back and forth, because we're going to go into that stress zone, but what are we going to do to take ourselves out of it? We're always going to wake up and go back on, because that's what life promotes us to do. But what are we going to do to ground ourselves, to reel ourselves in and take ourselves back out of it? This is all kind of like what, again, breath work I'm even trying to get with guys, because it really is being about more mindfulness. And then when you get good with it, you can go into your meditation stuff, work, and use that to always ground yourself, reel yourself in. It's that's what grounding yourself is, my brother. It's reeling yourself in and ignoring the noise and paying attention to yourself. And that's powerful stuff. And that's why I said the ice water therapy, not as in for swelling and stuff, but if you look up, the guru of this is Wim Hof, a guy from the Netherlands. He's basically made ice water therapy huge in terms of not just physiological benefits, but more so mental, because it's the ultimate way of dealing with stress. If you can sit in an ice tub for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or just 5 breaths and not freak out, keep calm, you're learning to deal with stress. And so this is actually a big thing out there right now for anybody listening, that to look into ice water therapy or Wim Hof, because it's been known as the cheapest and most fastest, most effective form of therapy, psychoactive therapy, because of not only the physiological benefits, but you're also learning to handle stress. And ice water never gets comfortable. It never gets comfortable, because guess what? Stress never goes away. It's how you deal with it, my brother. It's how you deal with it. And that's why you can look at the elites, but don't necessarily compare yourself to the elites. No one can ever compare themselves to Kobe Bryant. But that's a guy that just doesn't get fazed by anything. He's zero not afraid. But 9 people out of 10 will get afraid on an NBA court just because of the pressure, the lights, the crowds, the size of people. We all say we can play in the NBA, but believe me, it's a harder thing to do. And just learning to handle these threats. What are threats? What is causing anxiety? Is it something that's physiological, breathing, or is it actually something that we're input? Ignore the noise, my brother. That's what it all comes down to. Mindfulness.
And I appreciate you even giving that advice, because like I say, I know a lot of people that deal with stress, that are athletes, or even deal with mental health issues that they don't really address, or even they just try to basically, like, let's say for instance, like myself, I put my identity into basketball. But once the identity went away, now you have to try to cope and find something that you're passionate about. And then that's why I created this podcast for people that's even listening, that's struggling like this, and bringing on guests like yourself, where you give literally tools to help them get to another level that they never thought they could even get before. And I appreciate you coming to the show, just giving that advice.
Yeah. I mean, let me just quickly touch on it. Like, finding a purpose, obviously that's the struggle for everybody. No one's going to have an easy way of finding a purpose, but how much time are you spending grounding yourself, reeling yourself in? That's the thing. It's like, well, no, I'm not. All I ever do is look at the distractions, look at the social media, look at TV or whatnot. And what is grounding yourself? Well, step number 1 is reeling yourself back in, and breath control. That's number 1, is like, all right, let me concentrate on my breath. Then getting a sense of your feet. Maybe you want to close your eyes, maybe you want to open your eyes, maybe you want to see what's around you. That's good. We should be seeing what's around us, because why? We're always looking down at our phones. So doing these little things, and maybe taking more walks even, is a healthy practice. We don't think of it as meditation, but if you're getting into your flow and like not distracted, not on your phone, not talking, just going, anything you do, whether it's a jog, and that's when you're in, almost you don't even think and just time's just passed. That is almost a practice of meditation, and being in this flow state, whatever flow state means, for the lack of a better term. It's something I would encourage everybody to do. And the problem is that, again, basketball is not that. Basketball is orderly chaos. It's stress. It's on. It's driven. Good, but we need to put ourselves and take ourselves out of that, just like anything in life, just like our jobs. It doesn't matter. Everything's going to push you to the stress zone. What are you doing to take yourself out of it? How are you grounding yourself? We all need that, my brother. We all need it.
Definitely. And so last question I have for you is, what is a typical day like for you? And is there any like special routines that you go through yourself to keep yourself grounded? Because I know, like I said, I'm sure you're during the season that you can be stressed out. So is there anything that you can do to keep yourself grounded mentally and focused on the tasks that you have to do?
For me, when I actually don't work out a couple of days in a row, I start to, if I'm especially dealing with stress, I'll get depressed. So I need to work out. So working out's good, but I don't want to put that as the only thing, because at the end of the day, working out is a little bit stressful. It's orderly stress, but we need a little bit something else and so forth. So I try to, therefore, first of all, get outside. Getting outside, getting sunlight is huge.
Mm.
Whatever that means to you. Then getting outside and getting your bare feet on the ground is also huge. We could also put another whole podcast on just this, but foot contact with the ground, something we're really missing in life, man. And it's very, very natural. Everywhere we walk is hard, man-made surfaces. So being able to put your foot on grass or on sand, whatever, and just doing some kind of activity, maybe that's playful, good stuff, man. This is what our body needs. A little bit of fun, It's just, what do we equate fun as? Is it always stressful, driven fun? Or is it something that's a little bit more mindful, playful, something that's going to take us out of that zone and put us into a happier place. These are all things that people can adopt, and there's no one right way to do it. Meditation is one way. But in season, because I don't have time for necessarily to do all these outdoor activities. Sorry, because I got off a tangent there. In season is just hard. But what I'm planning on doing now is utilizing the cold water therapy in season, because we'll have ice tubs there. Basically, as of right now, because I'm at home working out, like I said, I always end my showers with cold showers, every single shower. And trust me, I never want to do it. I never want to do it, but I make myself do it. I was like, you're going to do this. So 2 minutes, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's that. And that always gets you feeling great. You just feel great afterwards. Mm-hmm. That's just physiologically. So, and then whenever I work out outdoors, I always go for a swim in the ocean if I happen to be close by. Mm-hmm. Cold water dip, doesn't matter, if it's dark or light, you get in. It's always a little intimidating because of the waves, but again, afterwards you feel great. Just that blood rush and all that is good stuff. So I plan on, because in season I'm so impacted with my 3 duties, just getting in that cold tub when I can to practice my breath work under extreme pressure, and finding ways where I can get a set in and here and there in the weight room, because sometimes I get so caught up in my duties that I neglect the weight room and I neglect working out. And then I guess what? I get all moody because I haven't worked out. But remember, strength is number one. So you could always throw in an exercise, come back to it, and then you'll never really get tired and you'll get the most out of it. Because guess what? Quality is what you want to gain for first. So everything's tied together, my brother. Everything.
Yes. And are there any higher education goals that you're pursuing yourself, per se?
Like I mentioned, a couple of these certifications I'm involved with Posture Restoration Institute. I've done a bunch of their courses. I just want to get accredited by them. Doesn't really mean much, but I'll kind of just be listed on their website and kind of give me a little bit more notoriety in their field. They're not a cookie cutter program. They're very much like a mini university, and everybody's about contributing their own ideas, which makes the whole program really shine, which is kind of why I wanted to complete that program. And like I also mentioned, this testing protocol in Neurokinetic Therapy, I plan to finish that. It's another little 3-step program, 4-step program that I'm trying to finish. Those are my priorities, but as far as university, any of that stuff, not really. At this point, I'm just trying to work, and not really going to go back into school because of debt and whatnot. Yeah, it hasn't been on my radar. Sometimes I've wondered, should I be a doctor of, because I do specialize so much in healing but do I really need that title? Do I need to spend thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars and put myself in school just for that title? Well, I'm not saying I know it all, but I have a lot of tools which work for me, and I have people need the help. Like we said, everybody's got breathing problems, and everybody's got asymmetrical biases, and we don't have enough, reciprocation and learning how to do that in the weight room. So I have enough that I can help the people with, whether they're athletic or non-athletic. So I'm sticking with what I know, and I mentioned these 2 programs. Please seek them out if you're looking for continuing education. They're great programs. Postural Restoration Institute, Neurokinetic Therapy. You can't go wrong with either one. They'll boost level you up big time as a trainer or a therapist.
And I want you to just share your contact information too, because I know you got the YouTube channel, the Instagram. So would you mind just sharing that as well?
Yeah, so I go by Big Mish Movement. With Instagram, it's BIGMISH_MVMNT. We should write that out for you in the show notes or whatever. And then my YouTube page is Big Mish Movement written out. Unfortunately, I do not have enough subscribers to change the URL. But if you guys subscribe, I can get to 100 subscribers and change it to actually Big Mish Movement. But you should be able to find me. Big BIGMISH Movement. It's linked on my Instagram.
Definitely, and I'll definitely put that in the show notes as well for people that's listening. And like I said, Mitch, I appreciate you just even coming on the show and talking with me. I'd love to have you on a part 2 just to talk about like just the overall human body and the healing process. Because I know even with you just speaking on just a little bit about getting human contact with the bare ground or even the bare grass, I know that's something in proportion that a lot of people overlook, and I've read articles about it, but I really never really got in depth into it. But I would love to have you back on the show, and just like I said, you're one of those people that I enjoy talking to. I learn so much from, and I appreciate you coming on the show and talking with me.
No, it's a pleasure. Yeah, different conversation for another day. But step 1 today was even emphasizing breathing, because we can't talk about that stuff until we have our breath work down and get a little bit in tune with that. So hopefully your listeners or anybody that tune in today can maybe take a second to think about that and what that means to them. And then when there's part 2, you tie that in, and now you're going to be really grounded per se. But it's all part of the plan, my brother. It's all part of the plan. Breathing first and then moving.
Definitely. And then the last question I have for you is something and it's something I ask all my guests I have on the show. What is something that you're most grateful for?
Ooh, man, that's hard. The most, can I only say one? I don't know.
Grateful for, my man. It's up to
you. All right. Well, since we're on the topic, I am grateful for the breath of life, because the breath of life just brings us back. Again, no matter what you're dealing with, getting that good breath is sometimes really just how we deal with it. Pain, you're suffering from pain, getting that good breath. Picking up something heavy, a good breath. When we're dealing with something stressful, a sigh is actually a good sign, because we want to be doing that. It's just perceived as negative because people go, ah. But what you're doing is getting rid of air and getting good flow. So air is what we live by. It's the necessity of life. Without it, we wouldn't be surviving on it. There's no other life anywhere else without air. So I'm going to say that's what I'm grateful for. But of course, I would say I'm grateful for my parents, grateful for my wife, grateful for the Lakers for keeping me on staff, even though there's been a global pandemic.
Definitely, my man. Like I said, I appreciate you coming on the show, chopping it up with me for a little over an hour now. And like I said, you gave so much great information. And I'd love to have you on the show for part 2.
Anytime. I would love to do it.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Q's Health and Wellness Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe or to leave us a review on iTunes or the listening platform of your choice. Also, please check us out at QuinnMitchellII.com, as well as find us on Instagram for more useful content and resources.